Have you ever noticed how the most popular health advice sometimes completely ignores how human beings are actually built? For the last decade, the golden rule of diet and productivity culture has been incredibly simple. Just stop eating. Skip breakfast, power through your entire workday on black coffee and sheer willpower, and then reward yourself with a massive dinner at 8 or 9 at night. It sounds efficient, right? It fits perfectly into the modern hustle. But what if I told you that this exact routine might be quietly sabotaging your metabolism, wrecking your sleep, and fighting against millions of years of human evolution?
It is a fascinating paradox, isn't it? We have engineered this modern lifestyle where we genuinely believe we can just override our internal biology with a fasting app and a busy schedule. But the latest science is completely flipping the script. A massive wave of new data, specifically some groundbreaking meta-analyses from 2024 and 2025, has essentially proven that we have been looking at fasting all wrong. The old narrative was entirely about duration. How many hours can you go without food? But the undeniable truth emerging from the clinical trials now is that duration is only half the puzzle. The real biological leverage is all about timing. We are officially moving from the era of simply skipping meals to the science of metabolic timing.
Metabolic timing, that immediately feels like a much heavier, more precise concept than just don't eat for 16 hours. Because the standard intermittent fasting model that went viral was almost always skip breakfast, start eating at noon, finish at 8. But this new research is pointing to something called early time restricted eating, or ETRI. What makes shifting that eating window to the earlier part of the day so radically different from a biological standpoint?
To understand why it is so different, you have to look at how our bodies process energy. Think of your metabolism like a highly efficient factory. In the morning, the factory is fully staffed. The machinery is oiled, the lights are on, and the workers are ready. In biological terms, human insulin sensitivity, glucose tolerance, and digestive efficiency are naturally at their absolute peak earlier in the day. Your body is practically begging for fuel to process. But as the sun goes down, that factory starts sending workers home. The machinery powers down. If you drop a massive load of raw materials, say a heavy dinner or late night snacks into that factory at 9 or 10 at night, the system just cannot handle it efficiently.
That is a brilliant way to picture it. You are basically forcing a skeleton crew to process a massive shipment of goods in the dark. So when people do the classic skip breakfast, feast at night routine, they are dumping all their fuel into the system exactly when the body is trying to shut down for repairs.
Exactly. And the 2025 randomized clinical trials show exactly what happens when you do that. When you compare early time restricted eating to late eating, even if the calories are exactly the same, the early group sees significantly better outcomes. We are talking about better preservation of fat-free mass, lower diastolic blood pressure, improved fasting glucose, and a literal reduction in metabolic age. The mechanism is biologically elegant. Morning and midday eating perfectly matches your natural circadian rhythm. Late eating creates friction. It increases your post-meal glucose exposure and severely disrupts your overnight metabolic recovery.
Which makes total sense, but it also completely shatters the illusion that a calorie is just a calorie. I think a lot of people still cling to the physics argument that if you eat 2,000 calories, it doesn't matter if it happens at 8 a.m. or midnight. But you are saying the body actually treats those calories differently depending on the position of the sun.
It absolutely treats them differently. Now, to be perfectly fair to the science, this is not magic. The comprehensive reviews from this year do acknowledge that when total calories are strictly matched, the sheer weight loss between different fasting windows can sometimes be comparable. A lot of the weight loss benefit of any fasting protocol comes from simply having less time to eat, which naturally reduces calorie intake. However, the real, undeniable edge of early time restricted eating isn't just about the scale. It is the combination of calorie control, circadian alignment, and the elimination of late-night digestive load. That trio is what transforms your metabolic health.
Let's ground this in reality because the theory is great, but human behavior is messy. I want to look at how this actually plays out in people's lives, especially when we start tracking the hidden metrics. Let's talk about the classic startup founder archetype. You know the type. First meal is a rushed salad at noon, they snack through afternoon meetings, and then they finally sit down for a heavy dinner or order takeout at 10:30 p.m. while clearing emails. They think they are biohacking because they fasted all morning. What is actually happening under the hood?
That is such a common profile, and it is a perfect example of where wearable technology totally exposes the flaw in that lifestyle. If you look at the data from something like an OXYZEN ring for that exact founder, the story isn't about their weight. The story is their recovery. Their wearable data will show an elevated nighttime heart rate, terrible sleep depth, and rock-bottom heart rate variability, or HRV. Their body is spending the first 4 hours of the night digesting a heavy meal, instead of repairing tissue and consolidating memory.
Because the factory is working overtime when it should be closed.
Precisely. Now, if you take that same founder and shift their eating window to, say, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. for just 14 days, the transformation in the data is stunning. The narrative isn't the fat melted off. The real victory is that their late-night digestive load drops to zero. Their sleep architecture normalizes. Their morning energy skyrockets and their HRV stabilizes. They haven't necessarily changed what they eat. They just stopped forcing their body to digest while it was trying to sleep.
That is profound. We treat our bodies like 24/7 cloud servers that can just process inputs whenever we upload them, but we are actually solar-powered organisms. We are deeply tied to the rotation of the planet, whether we want to admit it or not. Let's pivot to another scenario that I think a lot of people will relate to. What about someone dealing with borderline type 2 diabetes? Say, a patient in a place like Makati, where the culture heavily revolves around late, rice-heavy dinners. How does shifting the window change the game for someone who is already metabolically compromised?
That is a phenomenal use case, because a 2025 systematic review specifically looked at time-restricted eating in patients with type 2 diabetes, and the improvements in glycemic control were remarkable. In the case of the patient in Makati, the traditional medical advice might be to just brutally cut out the rice, which is culturally isolating and incredibly hard to sustain. But with early time-restricted eating, the intervention is different. Instead of completely removing the carbohydrates, you shift them to earlier in the day, you add some protein and fiber, and you strictly end the eating window by early evening.
So they still get to eat the foods they are culturally and personally attached to, but they are feeding those carbs into the system when the insulin receptors are actually awake and ready to process them.
Exactly. The insulin sensitivity is higher, so the body clears the glucose from the bloodstream much more efficiently. By the time they go to sleep, their blood sugar has stabilized. The health intelligence angle here is brilliant. It was not only what he ate, it was when his metabolism received it. It turns diet advice from a restrictive punishment into a strategic timing game.
I love that framing. Health intelligence. It is so much smarter than just eat less. But I have to bring up the fitness world because there is a massive demographic of gym goers who are completely loyal to the skip breakfast model. They wake up, drink pre-workout, lift heavy, and then basically starve themselves until mid-afternoon, only to end up binging on thousands of calories right before bed. They think they are optimizing fat loss, but it sounds like they are setting a trap for themselves.
They absolutely are. And it is a trap built on a misunderstanding of hormones. When you aggressively skip breakfast and push your body through intense physical stress, you are spiking cortisol. By the time the afternoon rolls around, you aren't just hungry, you are experiencing a severe hormonal hunger rebound. That is why they end up binging at night. Their willpower is depleted and their biology is screaming for calories.
And then they go to bed with a stomach full of food, their core temperature is elevated from digestion, they sweat through the sheets, and they wake up feeling exhausted. So they drink more caffeine and do it all over again. It is a vicious cycle.
It is the definition of a vicious cycle. Early time-restricted eating completely flips that model. If that same gym client wakes up, eats a solid, protein-rich breakfast, and fuels their body when it actually needs the energy, the hunger rebound disappears. They finish eating by 5 or 6 in the evening. Their body digests the food, their core temperature drops appropriately for sleep, and they wake up completely recovered. Eat earlier, finish earlier, recover better.
It is so incredibly logical when you lay it out like that, but it makes me wonder about the deeper societal cost of all this. Why is eating late so ingrained in us? It feels like we have sacrificed our biological rhythms on the altar of modern convenience and productivity. We have artificial lights that tell our brains it is noon at midnight, and we have food delivery apps that can drop 1,000 calories at our door at 2 a.m. We are fighting a war against our own biology, and honestly, we are losing.
That is the philosophical core of this entire discussion. We have separated ourselves from nature. For hundreds of thousands of years, human activity was dictated by the sun. When it got dark, it was dangerous to be out. You couldn't hunt, you couldn't forage, so you rested. Your internal organs evolved to use the darkness as a cue for cellular repair. Now, we use the darkness to catch up on emails and eat pizza. We are asking our bodies to perform a biological miracle every single night. And the cost of that is the modern epidemic of metabolic syndrome, poor sleep, and chronic fatigue.
It really recontextualizes the whole concept of fasting. The viral message was always fasting works because you don't eat. But the real message, the one backed by this massive wave of new data, is that fasting works best when it respects your body clock. It is not about deprivation, it is about alignment.
That is the perfect way to summarize it. And that is why this topic is exploding right now. It sits right at the intersection of everything people care about. It addresses weight loss, but without the misery of endless calorie counting. It tackles the massive cultural focus on glucose and insulin management. It taps into the growing fascination with circadian biology. And most importantly, it is instantly verifiable.
Right? Because of the wearables, you don't have to wait 6 months to see if it is working. You can literally wake up tomorrow, look at your sleep score, look at your resting heart rate, and see the biological proof that your body prefers to digest food while the sun is up.
Exactly. Wearables have made the invisible visible. When you can literally see your heart rate variability plummet after a late night meal, it changes your behavior. You stop seeing late night eating as a harmless treat and start seeing it as a direct tax on your recovery and your energy for the next day. This is the ultimate evolution of personalized health. We are no longer blindly following generic diet rules. We are using technology to listen to our own biological rhythms.
It is a profound shift in perspective. We spend so much time obsessing over what is on our plate, counting macros, debating carbs versus fats, that we completely ignored the clock on the wall. The 2025 data has made it impossible to ignore anymore. Timing changes absolutely everything.
It really does. If there is one takeaway from all the clinical trials, the meta-analyses, and the wearable data, it is this. Your metabolism is not a machine you can just switch on and off at your convenience. It is a deeply complex, beautifully orchestrated rhythm. When you fight that rhythm, you pay for it with your health, your sleep, and your longevity. But when you align with it, when you simply give your body its fuel, when it is actually prepared to use it, everything becomes easier.
That leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. If the secret to better energy, better sleep, and a healthier metabolism isn't necessarily eating less, but simply eating earlier, what is stopping you from closing the kitchen tonight? Are you eating because your body actually needs the fuel? Or are you just feeding a modern habit that your biology is desperately trying to reject? It is definitely something to chew on, preferably before 6 p.m.